and welcome to this GSA EIS event, Trusted Internet Connections 3.0. My name's Jim Russo, and I'm with the IT category within GSA in the Enterprise Technology Solutions Division. And we have a good webinar lined up for you today. Just want to start you off with a little bit of history here. OMB released Memo 19-26 back in September of 2019, and it was titled Update to the Trusted Internet Connection Initiative. The purpose of that was to enhance network security across the entire federal government in an increasingly cloud-based network environment. It's hot today in the Washington, D.C. area. I'm looking over here. My thermometer has been flirting with 90 degrees the last hour. TIC 3.0, even now, remains a very hot topic. So today we're being joined by two well-known subject matter experts from the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA for short, to give you an update on TIC 3.0 activities. We'll lead off with Sean Connolly. He's the CISA TIC Program Manager, and he'll discuss the latest TIC 3.0 guidance and use cases. He'll be followed by Joe Drummond, or JD for short. He's with the National Cybersecurity Protection System Program Office in CISA, who will discuss what's being done to support the Einstein program, the Einstein service and cloud environment. I'll be back after them to discuss how EIS, Enterprise Infrastructure Solutions contract, will support TIC 3.0 solutions as part of an agency's overall IT modernization effort. And finally, Justin Morgan will wrap us up with a Q&A session. So please, as the webinar goes on, please enter your Q&A, your questions in the Q&A pod within Zoom. You won't necessarily see those questions publicly unless our moderator shares them publicly. At the conclusion of the webinar, later on today or tomorrow, we'll be sharing a PDF version of the presentation with all of those who have registered, so you'll get an email from us for that. And sometime in the near future, the recording of the webinar will be posted on ITAU. So with that, I want to pass the microphone to Sean, and he can start us off.
Hey, Jim, thank you. Just want to give a sound check. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're coming in loud and clear.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Jim, and thank you to GSA for the opportunity to talk about TIC and NCPS and what we're doing over at CISA. So again, my name is Sean Connolly. I lead the TIC program at CISA. Next slide, please. We'll dive right into what we're talking about. So as Jim mentioned, TIC is the federal government's primary strategy and how to enhance network security across the federal enterprise, meaning 100 or so federal, civilian, executive agencies. For the last 10 years, the government's primary strategy was towards a legacy castle and moat philosophy. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. September 2019, OMB released Memo 1926, updated the TIC initiative. Then in July 2020, CISA, in collaboration with a number of stakeholders and partners, including our friends at OMB and GSA, released the core TIC 3 documentation. There are three themes of new updated guidance. Offers a new security strategy, allowing agencies to explore new opportunities for redefinition of their perimeter. Flexible architectures allows for alternatives to the castle and moat strategy that most of us are familiar with, but allows for alternative architectures to define the agency's boundaries and perimeters. And visibility, that situational awareness mission, both to the agency and what Joe Drummond will be talking a little bit on the CISA side. So understand that shift from securing a single network boundary to a distributed secure architecture. It's the most fundamental change in the updated guidance. Next slide, please. So in July 2020, we released a number of core documents. These were 2+ years in making. Multiple interagency working groups occurred. We had participation from over 50+ agencies. We had, through GSA, we had multiple meetings with each of the 9 or so EIS vendors. We had deep dives and one-on-one meetings with cloud providers, traditional security vendors, agencies themselves, and a number of pilots also. So documents can be grouped into two sets. The first two, the guidebook of the reference architecture, is what we consider strategic and programmatic. The last three, the capabilities catalog, the use cases, and the overlays, those are more operational and tactical. We think agencies and everyone will use more on a day-to-day basis. So these core documents make up the scaffolding as we call the TIC 3 guidance. And we'll do a deep dive into some of the use cases, the traditional TIC, the branch office, and remote user. And all this guidance can be found at CISA's website at the URL posted on the slide. Next slide, please. So TIC 3 is positioned to help agencies accelerate their IT modernization plans. On the right side are some of the common themes that we hear from agencies, vendors, and the greater IT community on TIC. Trust zones, a new concept in TIC 3 that we'll talk about in a moment. Zero trust, the continual establishment and reestablishment of confidence in systems, obviously very heavily focused with the cyber EO that recently came out. SASE, secure access service edge, and edge computing. We'll explore most of these throughout the presentation. Next slide, please. One of the items we introduced in this new guidance is the concept of trust zones. Trust zone is a logical boundary placed around a computing environment. The trust zone concept is intentionally abstract, allowing an agency the flexibility to shrink or expand that zone to properly secure the embedded computing resource. I think one thing to key understand talking about zero trust is we're not talking about the implicit trust that's been embedded in networks for the last 10 plus years. But it's more about explicitly building confidence in systems over time, but recognizing confidence itself can be ephemeral. The confidence needs to be reestablished over time. Ideally, we want to shrink those trust zones down to be as small as possible to limit the attack surface. But the TIC guidance allows the agencies to have the flexibility to determine the size and shape of their trust zones. And we'll show these more in a little bit. Those 4 dark blue dots are PEPs, policy enforcement points, common industry term that can enforce security policy in and out of those trust zones. Well, this concept of disparate trust zones, the perimeter can now be anywhere an enterprise needs it to be. The perimeter can be dynamically created and elastic. The perimeter can be policy-based. The perimeter doesn't have to be bound by a network. Next slide, please. So here we give an idea of the different types of trust zones. On the left is the old TIC 2 model. That trust zone, the primary boundary, is at the top of the diagram, the traditional TIC. Not the most flexible of architectures. At that TIC at the top is where the enterprise firewalls, web proxy detection sensors, and other boundaries protection mechanisms are placed. Everything inside that large trust zone is considered trusted. The middle diagram shows these same resources protected by segmenting the resources into smaller or granular trust zones. Now we're able to position the security closer to the resources themselves instead of aggregating everything at one access point. The trust zone can be protected by a PEP that is more tailored and focused on the resources that requires protection. On the diagram on the right, we show a zero trust environment. You notice the network itself isn't represented. In zero trust environments, the network is suspect. A lot of the controls in a zero trust architecture have an identity focus embedded into them. Identity supports this new flexible model. Identity is becoming the fabric that binds the resources together. Identity is now becoming the network. Next slide, please. So now we'll dive into a couple of the use cases that have been released over the last few months. Next slide, please. We'll ground our presentation by walking through the use case generation. There are 2 core processes that lead to the development of use cases: pilots and best practice snapshots. In coordination with the Federal CISO Council, agencies can choose to sponsor pilots. These agencies will work with their vendors in the background, OMB, USDS, GSA, as well as many teams at CISA, the TIC team, NCPS, CDM, the threat hunting teams will observe the pilots. We will take those lessons learned from these pilots, distill them into use cases. At the same time, we may work with best of breed agencies that have current instantiations of the desired use case. We call those interviews TIC snapshots. So these TIC pilots and snapshots will feed into our use case. Once the Federal CISO Council approves the use cases, agencies are free to adopt them. Next slide, please. So just mentioned, there are a lot of hands in the pot when it comes to generating use cases. Input comes from many different agencies, vendors, and the Federal CISO Council. Going over from left to right, again, in CISA, there's a number of teams that are involved. At OMB, they are heavily involved, of course, also with their partners within USDS. The Federal CISO Council sponsors the pilots and approves the use cases. Then towards the right, GSA, we have the Enterprise Infrastructure Solutions team, of course, led by Jim Russo, Alan Hill. And we also have the sponsoring agencies. And it's very important to make sure that we understand that just heavy involvement from a variety of different vendors in generating these use cases, typically through the sponsoring agencies. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits of these TIC use cases? It's a core reflection of what we're trying to do with TIC 3, namely towards a more flexible and tailored security approach. Agencies can apply use cases to map out the specific security architectures and capabilities that they need, instead of conforming to a static one-size-fits-all approach. Not only do use cases provide security pattern templates, they also provide specific guidance on how agencies can implement the required security capabilities for each use case. Next slide, please. So this is a quick snapshot of where we are with the different use cases. On the left column, the ones that are available now, the traditional TIC, the branch office, and the remote user. Those are all available. The remote users, of course, in a draft phase. We'll review each of these in detail in a moment. Then in the queue, there's a number of use cases that are outlined in the OME memo for infrastructure to service, SaaS, PaaS, and email. Then on the very right, there's also other ones we have on the horizon that we'd like to engage in, towards zero trust, Internet of Things, how do agencies work with partner networks, may work something individually tailored toward EIS. There's always questions about a unified communications platform and how to secure those. So I think this shows at a really high level where our focus is right now. And again, we've released the ones on the right, and I'm sorry, the left, and we are towards the ones in the middle is where our focus is right now. Next slide, please. When we build out these use cases, it's important to understand some of the improvements that we've made based on feedback. Each of these times we release a use case, there's a request for comment period. We highlight here the request for comment period. We released the core documents, had over 500 comments for those 5+ documents I showed back a few slides ago, including a number of comments for the traditional TIC and branch office use case. There's between 30 different government agencies and industry organizations that submitted comments. So just to give some perspective, the traditional TIC use case, I think, went from about 12 pages of content, the draft, to about 30 pages. The branch office use case, the draft was 16 pages. The final version is 28 pages. Last year in April, we had to release the interim remote telework guidance to help everyone as they support the telework surge. That guidance was 23 pages long, whereas the remote user use case is 49 pages long. So almost double the amount of content for each one. And this, again, is based on listening to agencies, vendors, a greater community, and understanding the scope of what should be in these different use cases. Next slide, please. Let's start off the traditional TIC use case. It defines how the network security can be applied when an agency has personnel on their traditional network in a physical location that uses a traditional TIC access point. This is more, if you look on the left side, the traditional north-south corridor that we built our security protections around for the last 20+ years. Everything on the south side of that compass, the remote user, agency users, applications themselves, and data centers are what is considered that trusted environment. Then the north side of that compass, the big bad web, public users, and cloud environments. That was represented as being outside the agency's perimeter. We took that same common architecture compass, and this is what it looks like in the traditional TIC model. Again, the green circles those trust zones. Everything's protected within those, or considered protected and trusted in those trust zones. Then outside, we have the different roles and different elements that can be used to talk into those models. And again, this is based on the traditional TIC use case. Next slide, please. So there's a number of security patterns that we outline in traditional TIC. I'll just briefly mention these. Each one of these have detailed guidance and tailored capabilities towards them. But we have security patterns are for the agency campus, going through the TIC access point to the web, going through a TIC access point for public users, where there may be some public services that the public users are accessing that are in a DMZ, if you will, in an agency. Then also the traditional way, we've talked about this before in webinars about that trombone or hairpinning traffic through a TIC access point between the agency's on-prem environments and to to different partner environments. There's also one more toward connecting through TIC access points going to different partner networks themselves. And this is just the traditional patterns that we've supported for the last 10+ years through the TIC 1 and TIC 2 architectures. Next slide, please. So then we start building off of what we can change or where we can build or help agencies move the security patterns, move their traffic, and try to shape these architectures in a way so everything doesn't have to be routed back through those traditional TICs. And one of the first ones we focus on is a branch office. This use case demonstrates how agency branch offices can securely connect to the web, to cloud providers, and to the agency campus. This allows users in the branch office to interact with cloud resources without having to route through the agency's campus network. Next slide, please. There's a number of unique assumptions and constraints and benefits with these environments. Agency maintains control over and significant visibility into the branch office. The cloud providers that the agency uses are FedRAMP compliant. Benefits. The use case expands accessibility of cloud-based services, no longer having to route traffic through those TIC access points. Supports transition to distributed architectures and avoid potential cost increases of having to support the rerouting of traffic to go through those TIC access points. Next slide, please. Now these security patterns, as you look in the diagrams here, look familiar. They're just distributed versions of what we saw originally in the traditional TIC. But when you read the guidance in each of these, in these use cases, there is detailed guidance more tailored toward branch office scenarios. So here in this diagram, we see 3 different scenarios being outlined. The branch office going to the cloud provider. This one, the first scenario, option 1, agencies freely to go from the branch office directly to the cloud provider. Option 2, the branch office routes through the agency's TIC access point to get to the cloud provider. And option 3, branch office use some type of CASB or security vendor as a go-between between the cloud service itself and the branch office. Next slide, please. And we move to an option of how agencies can connect from the branch office to the web. There's a number of options. Option 1 is the branch office going directly to the web. Option 2 is going through the agency campus again. Option 3 is going through a security vendor or some type of CASB. Just want to highlight an option 1. This is one where it's very important, and of course JD will talk about this, that the agency's heavily discussed with the NCPS team, the Einstein requirements. This is one that we put in there. I think it's a little future leaning, but right now we are working with agencies to understand how it could be possible for agencies at a future date to be able to map out from branch office to the web itself. But it's really critical. Agencies talk to the NCPS team those visibility requirements before considering option 1. Next slide, please. Then also, lastly, again, the agency branch office going to the agency campus itself. It could be to a data center. It could be going to the headquarters. We leave this kind of abstract at the top, but we provide a number of options for the branch offices to connect back to the agency HQ or data centers. Next slide, please. Now the remote user use case. Mentioned in OMB memo, the remote user use case outlines 3 scenarios. Remote user assessing the agency's traditional network, CSPs, and internet using government furnished equipment. Next slide, please. Again, we offer a number of options. Admittedly, some of these look the same or look very similar to what we've seen in the first 2 use cases. The first option is remote user going through a traditional VPN to connect to the agency. The second one is some type of desktop as a service, a virtual desktop instance remote users leveraging to connect to the agency. Third is through a CASB or security vendor. And the fourth is something where they're connecting the agency but without a traditional VPN tunnel. Maybe there's something more at an application layer secured, like a TLS, to secure the environments. Next slide, please. And now we present options for the remote user use case and how the remote user can connect to cloud environments. Again, pretty similar between options 1, 2, and 3. First option, the remote user going through the agency campus to connect to the cloud provider. Option 2 is the agency remote user going through a CASB. Option 3 is remote user going directly to the cloud provider themselves. It's important to know with each of these, when you provide these, it's important for the agency to understand where they put their policy enforcement points and where they embed those different security solutions along the path of that connection. In options 1 and 2, you can see where there's possibilities for enforcement multiple layers upon the path. In option 3, there's only a few number of ways we can embed security along the path. Next slide, please. And third one, again, same scenarios, but each of these has different detail about the remote user going to the web itself. First option is remote user going through an agency to the web. Option 2 is the remote user going through some type of CASB or security vendor to the web. And option 3 is the remote user going directly to the web. Again, I highly enforce that For any of these options, we're in talking to direct web to talk to the NCPS team and JD's team for understanding of the requirements at the agency. Next slide, please. Each of these different use cases has a number of unique capabilities. I think the catalog that I briefly mentioned before has somewhere between 70 and 80 capabilities at this point. Each time we introduce new use cases, including a remote user use case, we offer new capabilities, and these are some of the capabilities we outlined from the remote user use case. Next slide, please. So this is the question we get. How do the agencies apply the use cases? We'll go through 1, 2, and 3. Step 1, agency selects the applicable use cases, security patterns, and security capabilities. Option 2, the agency will then define their trust zones. What are they trying to protect? How are they trying to protect it? Base those architectures and based on their risk tolerance. And option 3, the agency is going to use the TIC overlays and also the architectures themselves, how to execute the security capabilities themselves. Once the agency has established that appropriate security configurations, then they can actually procure the necessary security capabilities that will enhance their environments. Next slide, please. So securingthegrader.gov, this is just a slide we showed before in the federal cybersecurity lifecycle. We start with the TIC use case and overlays. There's a wealth of other programs, both within CISA, OMB, GSA, NIST. Agencies will use this type of raw materials to build out their environments. Then moving down to 4 o'clock, those environments will feed into the visibility requirements, both for NCPS and CDM. Moving over to about 8 o'clock, that's where the visibility helps the threat hunting teams and SOC teams at the agencies and CISA's own threat hunting team. This leads to a secure.gov. And of course, this want to be more of an ODA loop. So we are continually assessing and reevaluating the necessary steps. Speaking of steps, we'll wrap up. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the road ahead, we'll go over what the road for TIC over the next few slides. Next slide, please. The overlays. Security vendors are capabilities are broad. Vendors are responsible for producing and distributing these overlays. These overlays crosswalk the vendor services to the TIC capabilities. In practice, agencies will probably use multiple vendor overlays to deploy TIC-3 solutions. Agencies should utilize overlays to understand the coverage and gaps offered by a service provider's products and services. It's very important that agencies understand CISA does not adjudicate or endorse overlays. We do not attest to the strength of the mappings or validate the implementations. Next slide, please. We'll just wrap up with the document release phases. Again, we at the end and conclusion of phase 2, we've released a remote user draft, traditional TIC, branch office final drafts. We're currently working with a number of stakeholders to build out the other use cases in phase 3. Ideally, toward a phase 4, then we'll have a number of use cases that we'll be pitching to the Federal CISO Council. I think that's going to wrap up our presentation, and I want to pass it over to JD Joseph Drummond. One more slide for the end, and this is the contact information for us. But JD, over to you.
Sean, thank you for the handoff. Next slide, please. So my name is Joseph Drummond. I support the NCPS program, and I'm here to talk to you all about CLAW today. So let's dive right in. So the NCPS, or National Cybersecurity Protection System, is an integrated system of systems that delivers a range of capabilities such as intrusion detection, analytics, information sharing, and intrusion prevention. These capabilities are leveraged to secure and defend the federal, civilian, executive branch agencies, information technology infrastructure against cyber threats. And one thing that we've realized or observed is that more departments and agencies are moving to cloud-based architectures. And to be able to bridge that gap in visibility, NCPS is working on CLAW, which stands for Cloud Log Aggregation Warehouse, which is a flexible cloud-based architecture that's used to ingest a variety of log types for normalization and analysis. The intent is to increase visibility in the .gov space and for cloud activities. And so for volume 1 of NCERA, or the NCPS Cloud Interface Reference Architecture, it goes into the guidance for agencies on how they can participate in the CLAW pilot and the expectations of participating in the CLAW pilot. And volume 2 provides an index of common reporting patterns and considerations for how agencies can send the cloud-specific data to the NCPS cloud-based architecture. And so in later slides, we go into detail about what that looks like. Next slide, please. And so this slide shows that we're moving to a more shared responsibility model. Traditionally, NCPS sensors located at trusted internet connections or TICs or managed trust internet protocol services or MTIPS gateways capture security information as traffic passes between the agency and the internet. And traditionally, that's how we've been collecting this type of information. So the program, or NCPS, is evolving to ensure that security information about cloud-based traffic can be captured and analyzed, and that CISA analysts can continue to provide threat hunting and situational awareness support to those two departments and agencies. And so what I want folks to take away from this particular slide is that, you know, the responsibilities are spread across CSPs or industry agencies and CISA. And so from a CSP or industry perspective, you know, the expectation is to kind of review the documentation, identify service offerings that align with the roles and responsibilities laid out in NCERA, potentially develop vendor overlays so that when you're interfacing with departments and agencies, there's a common language on how to present data to the cloud log aggregation warehouse, and then potentially have service offerings that reflect being able to facilitate that transfer. And from the department and agency perspective, what we're expecting is that partnership relationship to take a look at the documentation. Once you all initiate the process, there's an onboarding form and a descriptive brief that lays out in detail next steps. And later on in this brief, we'll go over what exactly the departments and agencies will be filling out in terms of what data types are presented to CISA. Next slide, please. And so first step for the departments and agencies is to identify the reporting pattern. And this is also in the NCERA documents and also be a part of the onboarding form for CLAW. But the goal is to get a sense of, for stage A, the cloud sensing or what particular telemetry type is being presented to CISA, and stage B, which is agency processing. And on your end, that means preparing the data or telemetry type to be sent over to CISA, specifically CLAW. And so what that might look like is, if you're sending a VPC flow log and there are certain data elements that you do not want to send based on your mission or certain security preferences, being able to remove those data types before it's being sent to CISA. And lastly, the reporting to CISA. And during the onboarding process, if needed, there's a series of technical exchange meetings that we have to work out the particular reporting pattern that will be leveraged to send the data from the department and agency to CISA. And so far with the departments and agencies, we've seen a variety of methods and being able to send data to CISA. And so the architecture was intended to be flexible to take into consideration multiple reporting patterns. And so let's walk through this real quick. So, and no matter of fact, better yet, let's go to the next slide. I think it captures visually what's on this slide. Next slide, please. And so if we go into the example that we're looking at right now, we see the identifier is GN quadruple N double S. And so what that means is, if we follow from left to right the chart, that the sensor positioning is at the gateway. The telemetry type that's being delivered is network flow logs. The data filtering that's occurring on the department and agency side, none at this time. The data enrichment that's occurring, none at this time. And the data aggregation, none at this time. And so for data enrichment, if there's a tagging that needs to occur, or data aggregation, if there are multiple sub agencies or departments where that is occurring inside the department agency. You know, larger departments agencies have sub-agencies, then that's something that needs to be considered on the agency side prior to sending the data over to CLAW and data transformation. And for this example, none were selected at this time, but there's a multiple formats that data can be ingested, and a few of those are listed here. And so last but not least, the reporting to CISA for data transfer and CLAW distribution. For data transfer, like I spoke of earlier, there are multiple ways that data can be sent from point A to point B. So if it's in a cloud service provider environment, whether it be Google, Azure, AWS, we have mechanisms that we'll work out during the onboarding process to be able to transfer logs from whatever environment they're generated in to us. And so that also goes for third-party cybersecurity service providers. If folks are leveraging some type of threat intelligent gateway service, we do also ingest logs from those types of services. Next slide, please. And so for this one, this slide is added to just talk or to visually display the multiple data elements that we could potentially collect on, right? And so when this kicked off, there was an internal discussion about what logs are relevant from a cybersecurity perspective, because what we don't want is to boil the ocean. And so the amount of log data that we could potentially ingest made us kind of want to more focus on relevant cybersecurity logs and how that helps support our mission. And so from the log types or the telemetry types that are listed, we selected these. These were kind of, after analysis on our side, some of the ones that we thought were important: network flow logs, VPN logs, API activity logs, access and authentication logs for sure, and firewall logs. And so when we have conversations with departments and agencies, we're definitely initially focused on collecting net flow-like data, whether that be a VPC flow log in a Google private cloud or AWS environment, or something from a third-party cybersecurity service provider. But we are interested in collecting a variety of log types as well, and some of them are listed here. And so what we also during the onboarding process is we try to discuss things like cloud telemetry timeliness. Based on the service that's being leveraged, your access to cybersecurity telemetry data or logs might be hindered, or there might be a time delay. And so those are things that we try to identify in the onboarding process so that we can get an understanding of when the logs will be delivered. Will it be streaming? Will it be sent in a block style format? And so those are things that we try to work out ahead of time. Also, the timing coordination and timestamp labeling is something that we work out as well during that onboarding process. And with the goal and the intent is to make sure that we do all this work up front so that the maintenance of this data pipeline, if you will, is easier on our end. And one thing that has definitely came from departments and agencies that we're making sure to take into consideration future development of CLAW is the sharing costs, the cost of sharing that data with us, no matter what solution you choose. And so part of the pilot is focused on developing the architecture that's cost effective in this new shared security model construct. Next slide, please. And so to go into greater detail, what we really want departments and agencies to do in SIERA Volume 2 is to take a look at the most relevant reporting pattern for you. And so what that means is, if you all are aggregating logs to one tool within your environment, it might make sense to have a stream from that one source. If you all have a distributed security model where log types might be regionalized, or they might exist in different geographic regions, it might make sense for a different type of reporting pattern. And so that kind of goes back to the flexibility of this. What is a reporting pattern that works specifically for your data pipeline, and also it gives you the flexibility to leverage several different options. And like I said, we've seen multiple different reporting types, some of which logs coming directly from the SIEM environment, logs coming directly from the cybersecurity service provider, logs coming from the cybersecurity service provider to the department agency and then to us. And so once again, NCPS Volume 2 lays out the multiple ways that this can happen. And so to add emphasis to the last bullet, NCPS encourages departments and agencies to share additional cloud log types. And the reason behind that is the variety of logs that we're able to ingest not only speaks to building out more capability in CLAW in terms of ingestion, but also from an analytics perspective. The wider variety of logs that we're able to get is the more that is I guess more data for our analysts to work in. So when we talk about trying to leverage things like AI or building mechanisms to find the signal find the signal, separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, that's something that we can do with a variety of log types. And so part of the pilot is really not only focusing on the robustness of the ingestion architecture, but how can we leverage that data from the analytics perspective? And so that's why we're asking for multiple log types throughout the pilot. Next slide, please. And so this slide goes into the kind of the layout. It's a layout of the implementation pipeline. And so I'll go over it briefly from left to right. So we CISA on our end, we've developed the documentation, deployed CLAW, and with NCPS Volume 1 and 2 kind of communicated expectations. And the next stage is really working with the agency, the cloud service provider or industry, to review the documentation. And this is where the agency and that service provider reviews the documentation, take a look at what reporting patterns make sense with the service they're leveraging, but also in respect to the departments and agencies architecture, and then kind of have that conversation before meeting with CISA, and then we work out the details in those technical exchange meetings throughout the onboarding process, right? And so for the agency, they will be reviewing vendors' offerings, implementing the reporting pattern that they selected, and then maintaining that telemetry sharing mechanism. And so if it's a push from a third-party cybersecurity service provider, that would be ensuring that stream or the health of that stream is intact. And if it means pushing logs from a cloud environment, ensuring that there are mechanisms in place to make that stream consistent, and working with us to identify a solution before moving forward. And so, and last but not least, CISA is definitely ensuring consistency across the board, ensuring that the data that we're ingesting is normalized and able to be put in use for threat hunting analysts and our analytics services. Next slide. So next steps for CLAW. So, and I'll kind of lay out what it looks like from a department agency perspective, right? So there's an orientation brief at our first meeting, and we'll send the onboarding form after that meeting. You all will work within your organization or coupled with the service provider to fill out that form. And then we have a technical exchange meeting to go over that information and to discuss what reporting patterns make sense based on that information. And then we set a activation date. And so that might require a technical exchange meeting to facilitate that, but that's pretty much the workflow that we've been using for onboarding departments and agencies. And so, but sometimes the complexity is such that it takes multiple technical exchange meetings to kind of identify the solution to report that cyber telemetry data back from that agency to CISA, if that makes sense. Next slide. And so that's all I had. Next steps, please, if you have any questions, reach out to the URL that's being displayed. And with that, I have the great honor of passing it on to Jim Russo at GSA. Jim, please take over.
Okay, thank you, JD, and thank you, Sean, before that. Presented a lot of good material, and actually a lot of material, period, discussing the entire TIC program. And I know both Sean and JD gave basically links at the end of their briefs to get more information. But honestly, if you just want to go into your browser and punch in CISA and TIC 3.0, it'll take you directly to their main website, and it'll give you direct links to all the documents that Sean and JD have just discussed. So, that's a lot of information to absorb for anyone. There's a lot of guidance. There's a lot of activities going on between NCPS and some of the service providers to determine, what can be done in this area in the cloud environment. And so, to try to make sense of that, we here at GSA have done a lot of work with the EIS program, through the EIS program to provide services that move the ball forward and allow industry to create solutions to these requirements, and B, give some guidance and assistance to agencies that are trying to figure out how they put these requirements into their solicitations and get to that happy place that Sean was talking about with the vendor overlays. So the vendors have requirements to actually create overlays against. So let's move to the next slide, and I will quickly go through these because I know we're in the last 15 minutes here, and we want to leave some time for Q&A. So as I said, the main things on EIS in terms of what we've added to basically promote TIC 3 and IT modernization was the realization that you're not going to just go from a legacy network implementation and march directly into that TIC 3.0 environment with new solutions. There needs to be some things in place first. And so, some examples are moving from a TDM-based environment to Ethernet-based transport, going to IP services, employing software-defined wide area network management techniques, and I guess really determining, how you move from the legacy TIC environment, which was serviced through the GSA MTIPS program, to TIC 3.0 solutions to have those distributed policy enforcement points. That, in a way, if you're looking at traditional TIC, you may still have a need for an MTIPS type solution, a castle and moat type solution for a segment of an existing network or a legacy network. But now it's going to be a hybrid. You're going to try to integrate that with a cloud-based network. And finally, we also have updated the EIS contract to salute the fact that IPv6 is still a goal of overall to move everyone to IPv6 only networks, and we have the latest memo from OMB memorialized in the EIS contract. The two takeaways really from this slide are that EIS provides what we feel is a key pillar of any of the IT modernization efforts, whether it's TIC, whether it's Zero Trust going forward, and that's to employ a software-defined wide area network or SD-WAN solution. And EIS now gives the options to do that. And in addition to that, improving cybersecurity services, the EIS Managed Security Suite or Managed Security Services Suite includes now a fuller range of services that now encompass TIC solutions. So with that, let's go to the next slide. And I'm going to just highlight here what's in the blue box, which is we've created some IT modernization resources. These are really bite-sized infographics to visualize what we're talking about when we're talking about modernizing your WAN, moving to IP voice, software-defined wide area network, etc. So you can get a real summary of what it is, what the benefits are, how you would implement it, and what support you can get from GSA. So let's move to the next slide, and I'll go into the technology refreshment that we've implemented within EIS since contract award. It's literally been, it's coming up on 4-year anniversary of the award of EIS, hard to believe. But we did that at the end of July 2017. So what have we done to the contract? It's definitely not static. So the first thing we did was add a cloud service provider connection feature to our VPNS service, which is basically our main MPLS network transport service. And it was a way to allow some of our EIS prime providers to, serve some of their branded solutions that would basically expand agency network to a cloud environment, trusted cloud partners, and give our industry partners that didn't have those branded services a way to offer similar services of their own. We added SD-WAN as the first brand new service to EIS last summer. I'm happy to say that just about all of our EIS prime contractors have added that to their contracts, and they can provide it today. We've also encouraged all of our providers to partner with third parties. So we know there's a lot of third parties that offer CASB services, cloud-based security services, maybe even cloud-native security services. And through the cloud offerings on EIS, the cloud service area, and the catalog capability within that area, our primes can offer those services to complement their network transport and other value-added services they may provide, so to give you a complete solution. The TIC service we chose to add to our managed security services suite. And so it complements what we had there from the beginning, which was a managed prevention service, vulnerability scanning, and incident response services. And now there's a TIC service. So in a way, you can combine all those together and start to look at security as a service being offered through EIS. Broadband internet service we added as a distinct new service. We could provide that already through our internet protocol service, but with the broadband internet service, it better reflects what's commercially available out there, and it's akin to a business class internet service. We feel it's a little easier to understand when you're trying to put that together for industry to bid against that with a defined service. So that has been added. So when you're talking about software-defined wide area networks, there's a management overlay, which we provide through the SD-WAN service, and the underlay, which are the transport services. So now we can support MPLS through the EIS VPNS service, direct internet access through our IPS, our internet protocol service, and the broadband service through our broadband internet service. And so let's go to the next slide. And the broadband internet service is just that. It completes those network transport underlay options for SD-WAN. It reflects the way that the commercial marketplace prices those services today. We realize there's a lot of different pricing and a lot of different players across the country. So it's kind of difficult to do a one-size-fits-all pricing model, but we do have the capability to include the different pricing models that our vendors want to give us. Go to the next slide, please. Our trusted internet connection service. So I'll pause on this a little bit. So we've added it as a subservice, and as I said, we had existing subservices, but now we have this fourth one. And it really is the place to add on to, if you will, or replace the MTIP service that we have on EIS. So we're going to continue to offer our MTIP service. It's going to be TIC Reference Architecture 2.2 compliant service. That won't change. As you move to that traditional TIC use case that Sean described earlier on, our approach there is to use this TIC service to supplement the MTIPs, where to replace it, depending on how far an agency wants to go in moving to a totally cloud-based environment, or have a hybrid that has some on-premises still and some in the cloud. We're choosing to do that versus recast the MTIPs or have many flavors of MTIPs, because we just felt that would just really be confusing to try to create different versions of MTIPs at this point. And it also reflects the fact that these solutions are going to be customized on an agency by agency basis. So it gets to the point of, okay, well, how does the agency create requirements that industry can bid against? So let's go to the next slide. I guess before I get to that, I didn't follow my own script. We'll talk about the fact that, Sean, back on slide 6, actually, where you start to talk about the traditional TIC model and moving forward into a zero trust environment, that things would change. We go from the castle and moat to an identity-based access model. And the cybersecurity executive order, as many know, came out a week or so ago. It is really concentrating on getting agencies to migrate to the cloud and adopting a zero trust architecture as practicable. One thing's for certain, and that is SD-WAN is a key pillar in anyone who wants to try to implement a zero trust solution. And so by virtue of the fact that SD-WAN now is an integral service on EIS, we're doing what we can to support that move to zero trust. And actually, more accurately, we have mechanisms now, and we can put zero trust solutions together as they become commercially available on EIS. And zero trust, you don't buy a solution off the shelf and say, oh, zero trust as a service. You really do have to work through all the steps to put together a zero trust set of requirements and a solution. And that's really a topic for another day, but the key takeaway for now is that we have the ability to support those solutions under EIS. So let's go to the next, and back to where I left off before I got to that, which was, here's the tools that we provide on EIS to help agencies sort of crystallize their requirements. So we have templates that can be put in place. Now, these are kind of generic templates that we sit down with an agency, we use our solicitation assistance tool, and in that session, we basically walk through it, and then at the end, we generate a draft RFP that has all the pieces needed for a solicitation. Now it needs to be customized for an agency, maybe blanks need to be filled in, but at least there's a pretty solid draft. And our statement of objectives templates there for WAN modernization, EIS transition, also gives sample language that can be inserted into an existing solicitation, or maybe made as a standalone solicitation. Finally, we offer a scope review process that any solicitation going through EIS would come in to us for a quick scope review, which we turn around very quickly, make sure it's technically within scope, it meets the terms and conditions of the contract, and then allow the agency to go ahead and post that for a request for proposals. So it's very similar to what you would do for any modernization. You plan, you leverage what others have done. I'll be able to speak here in a minute. Pilot your solution if you can, and implement it. Next slide, please. And I want to get to the Q&A. So here is a list of guidance documents and materials we have on the GSA website. A quick way to get to those is gsa.gov/EIS. There'll be a number of user guides and some of the templates that I just spoke about. And with that, I think we have a few minutes left for Q&A. I want to pass the ball to Justin Morgan.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Jim, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, we have a couple of questions. JD, this one's going to come to you. Not sure how much you can say other than say, yeah, we're working with some, but are there any vendors offering the CASB solutions that have direct Einstein support, and I use my air quotes here, within their solution?
So I did read that one, and I was wondering what was meant by direct Einstein support. So well, I'll say this. There are departments and agencies that are leveraging third-party cybersecurity services to present NetFlow-like logs to CISA through Claw. And so if the question is, has there been work done leveraging industry solutions to present that traffic to Einstein? Yes, there is. And definitely, as you are thinking about onboarding to the Claw pilot, take that into consideration.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, JD. Also had another one, if you could, and I know you sent the reference architecture guides, and thank you in the chat. Hope folks follow those links and download those docs. But if you could real quickly, try to distinguish the different flavors of Einstein, E1, E2, and the 3A, and what is the Claw architecture involving at this time?
Okay, so me and Kyle Coble, who I co-lead this effort with, get that a lot. And so for E1, you could consider that the collection of net flow data currently. E2 is intrusion detection, and E3A provides intrusion prevention services. And so if you wanted to, I guess, compare Claw to what flavor of Einstein, I guess, it would be the ingestion of, for the pilot, ingestion of NetFlow-like data. And that's why we focused on the NetFlow-like data, whether it be VPC flow logs or from a particular vendor NSS logs, et cetera, to get that Einstein equivalency. And so Einstein currently collects NetFlow data at that industry, at the DA boundary in the TIC or MTIPS architecture. And so what we're trying to do is get the similar visibility in phase one, similar visibility to what's currently being seen by E1. And so phase two of the pilot is opening the type of logs that we collect, not just focusing on that NetFlow-like data.
Okay. Thanks, JD. And Jim, looks like this one is going to come your way. With an existing or soon to be awarded EIS task order, would an agency be able to obtain the TIC service from EIS provider as an established CLIN, or would it be a separate procurement action required?
It would be, it could be supplied as a CLIN under EIS, under the managed security services. The managed security services is a catalog service, which means it's a little different than, you know, a nailed up CLIN on the basic contract, but it's a CLIN on the contract nonetheless, defined by the vendor who's supplying that solution, with the definition of what that solution includes. So that is a contract CLIN. And it can be, you know, totally brought through an MSS solution, or it may involve some other services on the contract, you know, as applicable, and might include some equipment or labor support, perhaps. But, you know, the quick answer is yes, it can be supplied as CLINs under the contract.
And yeah, that's about taking us to the time. I don't see any other ones in the chat right now. I was wanting to throw one out there, but I'll do a time check. Should we do that?
Well, we have about a minute, so
Okay.
it's going to have to be.
Yep. So how does a modern network, create a more secure network infrastructure? And why should an agency move to, say, a TIC 3.0 type architecture?
So let's let Sean, do you want to start that?
You gave us that question with 20 seconds left. Well, follow the cyber EO, right? I mean, there's architecture-wise, there's a large emphasis towards zero trust. And so, you know, the agencies have to be both flexible and be able to support the new environments. And it's much more distributed than we were 10 years ago. So hope that landed the plane in, you know, a 15-second pitch. That's probably the best I can offer on that one.
Good, Sean. That'll be the last word.
All right.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I hope you learned something. As I said, we'll be distributing the PDF version of the presentation, and the webinar will be posted at a future time on the IT Acquisition University website. So with that, have a good afternoon, and we'll see you next time.